Real Hi-Fi Help here, again with a great tip for you guys, or several tips actually. Now this is the thing that I've noticed. Why do poor audiophiles have better sound than most rich audiophiles? And this is actually very interesting. I spent many years trying to figure this out, and I'm gonna make this video as short as possible so you guys can get through it. So I would say that number one, I would say that the rich ones usually have one or two elements that are more impressive in their overall sound. But usually, overall, it's just technically better sounding, but less integrated, less balanced, less natural, less intimate and warm. And I will explain why. Part number two here. Rich people usually have monoblocks. Okay, this is very important. And they normally create a more powerful and controlled sound, but are more unnatural. This is most of the times, not all of the times. There are exceptions to this rule. And number three here, rich people have huge speakers normally, and big speakers do impressive stuff, but normally they don't do micro detail very well and integrating and being balanced. So everything ends up sounding more like a hi-fi stock kind of sound, making it just a bit hollow, less intimate, and creating, yeah, it's just more hi-fi sounding, aiming more for the effects, individual effects in the sound picture than the overall musicality, balance, and integration. Now, because most people have monoblocks, they also have preamplifiers extending the audio signal. So again, the overall experience is a lot more about isolating the individual sound effects instead of fully integrating them, playing the music, which is the most important thing of the sound. So you actually have a piece of music ending up like sounding something that was originally recorded as a pretty good recording, and it just goes through this like studio type of filtering that almost makes it sound like it's got auto tuning and drum kits and all kinds of stuff like that, because you're basically taking a signal apart, putting it back together, and you're using several components doing that. And doing that on a high level is very difficult, even if you have a lot of money. Now, most preamplifiers are generally not very good, and the more you go for the integrated amplifier sound, the more the gear that you're using reacts to the changes that you are making. It's supposed to say because of a shorter signal. So monoblocks with preamps usually have a tendency of locking the sound more, because you're basically extending the signal, so there's less of the changes that you make to your system that you are going to hear generally, not always, but generally. And I would say that this is one of the most difficult pieces of equipment to fully get sounding balanced, integrated, and intimate. There are so many expensive monoblock preamplifier solutions where you just basically listening to sound effects. You're not really listening to music. It doesn't seem quite convincing, and it's usually very harsh and thin and mechanical. And I've heard thousands of setups, and it's almost always the same. The few people that are the exception are the people who have a ridiculous amount of time, ingenuity, skill, and usually are very good at pairing equipment, which most people sadly aren't, that have a lot of money. So let me just see. So if you have a certain brand of monoblocks, it is usually best to get the same brand as a preamplifier. That's a very good tip for full integration. There's also the extra element of that cable binding the preamplifier with the monoblocks, which also has its own sound signature, which also creates a problem generally getting it to fully integrate. The poor audiophiles normally know their system better, and run their system more efficient, and have also tried more combinations. Yeah, that's totally true. And rich people, what I seem to find is that many of them can't seem to get their cables, their power arrangement, and their network proper. They have all the money, but everything is kind of going in its own direction. And this also requires a lot of time and work. And I know that a lot of people that earn a lot of money don't usually have a lot of time. So this kind of explains it. And I also feel that a lot of people, a lot of rich people, don't quite believe as much in cables. And usually because of that, the sound is more mechanical, ugly, vulgar, and cool. So you typically have some over-dimensioned monoblocks preamplifier speakers that where the guy has used almost all the money on that, and there's almost taken no consideration into the cables, or the cables that have been bought that are pretty expensive just don't really go with that type of sound. So that's what I find a lot. And let me just see, got ahead of myself there. Yeah, and also because rich people, point 7 here, usually have far superior equipment. And when you have far superior equipment, you're opening yourself up for a type of detail that is a lot more difficult to control. It starts getting very, very difficult controlling the sound, because you're opening up for basically telling yourself what the weaknesses are in your system. And also, point 8 here, they also normally have a very big room where the speakers are further from the wall and there's more distance to the side walls, and also more distance from the speaker to the back position behind you when you're listening. And all of this causes a suck out in bass, creating a sound that moves too much and loses bass middle tone richness, making it just sound more harsh and frontal, where it goes in your face. So it becomes again more about the individual details instead of the sound as a whole. So those are my considerations. Please subscribe. Have a nice day. Bye.